Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints. Just people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We're continuing our run-through of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. We're up to the 10th episode of the third season. It's called Fascination. It first aired on November 28th, 1994. Teleplay goes to Philip Lezebnik. Story credit goes to Ira Stephen Bear and James Crocker. Directed by Avery Brooks. In this episode, Ambassador Lwaxana Troi visits the station to attend the Bajoran Gratitude Festival, resulting in an outbreak of passion throughout the station as people admit their secret feelings for each other. And as always, where sometimes if you go to patreon.com/thepensky file, you get to support the show. If you're at a certain level of tier, you get to guest host an episode, and we are joined by patron Matt. Matt, how are you?
Peldor Joy, Wes. How are you?
Good. Ready to talk about Fascination, which is, I don't think I'd ever actually seen this episode before, so this will be an interesting discussion. I think you're familiar with it, right? You'd seen it before this.
Unfortunately, I saw it when it first aired, and I watched it for this.
It's, we'll save it for the breakdown, but we're going to take a break. I'm going to play an audio clip. Me and Matt are going to come back, and we're going to break down Fascination.
Please, Commander, step aside. I need to speak to Jadzia.
I don't think she wants to speak with you.
You tell him, Benjamin.
I only want to give her this.
A Bajoran betrothal bracelet?
It's been in my family for generations.
Can I see that? Nerys, am I glad to see you?
Doctor, I need your help.
And I need yours too. You've got to get me away from Kira. I can't keep my hands off him.
Oh, it's worse. I can't keep my hands off him.
All right, Matt. So you started off with an interesting episode, I think, for your patron excursion into the podcast. I mean, I don't even know if I'd say this was a bad episode. I think it's a really unique, interesting episode. I don't think it's good. I don't know if it's really bad, and I don't know if it's great. But what did you think about it?
I thought it was, to use a common, I guess, notation, it's meh. It's neither good nor bad. It's just kind of there, like a holding position before the next episodes of more dark or exciting come in. It's unfortunate it comes right after Meridian, which is Brigadoon in pain. It's just not exciting or anything.
Yeah, I think that the Fascination's weird because it's not universally bad across the board. There are parts of it that are like extremely bad, and then there are parts of it that I really like. The thing that I really like about it is that it is a really strongly directed episode that gives you a really strong sense of place in the station. Like there's a lot of sweeping camera shots that really link the areas of the station and make it feel like it's a real community that's going on, that things are sort of happening as you are dealing with one group of people, you're cutting to the next group, and things are sort of working their way through. It feels very cohesive in a way that the cutting of episodes kind of interferes with, and it makes it feel that the station is actually a place. And the festival is another interesting thing that I think they really did well, that it establishes a sense of community on the station that isn't always there. We had talked about that in Civil Defense, I think, just in terms of like exploring what the station means and what the station is set up like. And I think this episode does that really well. On the other hand, it has this really dumb plot, and it's really...
No, that's a mild understatement. I mean, I agree with you that you do get a large sense of the scale of the station, that it's gotten bigger. Instead of just seeing that half section of the set that they continually walk on, even though that might actually be the case, you do get the feeling that there are lots of people there, and this gratitude festival, which is like a Ren festival, if you will, a Renaissance festival, you do get a feeling that there's something there, and it does add to a sense of community. But that plot with Lwaxana Troi is the thing I think that is painful. I think for me, the A plot is the bickering between Miles and Keiko, actually, for the balance of it. And unfortunately, my wife says, "Hey, that seems familiar," and I kind of almost said, "Shut up," but actually, I think I did say that. But yeah, that plot with her to be there. It's not that she needed the money. My question is why was she even on here? Were they running out of ideas? When I did some research, I saw that they were saying that they wanted something light and almost meaningless before they get into the more weighty episodes. But it feels like we've just had two of them in a row. And that last one of Meridian, or actually two ago when this is being recorded, it was just bad.
Well, I mean, I think that my problem with the Fascination plot line is that it's kind of the plot doesn't really feel like it fits DS9 at this point, because it's so episodic of an idea, and the reveal happens at the end. So it's not even really, I think one of the definitions of a farce is that the audience needs to be in on what the truth of the situation is. I would describe this episode as a farce, but it's an implied farce because you know something has gone wrong on the station. You don't learn until the last 5 minutes that it's basically a Sarek ripoff where a telepath on the ship is causing other people to feel things that they're feeling.
But it also feels a little bit like that Next Gen episode with Lwaxana Troi and where she's having that flash memory of her lost daughter.
Dark Page.
Dark Page, yes. I mean, this isn't as well done, actually, in comparison on just that drama of where she's going on, where she's more of a wounded or I guess a hurt person, a hurt mother. In this one, she has her space menopause psychic attack on everybody, and it's not even on anybody. It's on almost like a sniper attack on very specific people. You would think that someone losing it, like in Sarek, would go on like a big giant balloon of an area effect.
Yeah, like a sphere of influence around him.
I mean, if you going back to that Sarek episode, I mean, it was like Geordi and Wes were fighting, and they were like 3 decks away. Meanwhile, I mean, they have it choreographed where every time Troi touches her head, one of the main lead characters touches their head at the same time. But you would think that, and they're always conveniently in front of her. You would think that maybe that would be like people behind her, or that this gratitude festival would have a whole different meaning as people are just like, I don't know, maybe boning in the hallway or something like that. But that's just not the case here.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Well, I think that I did not even notice the Lwaxana influence on the episode. Like I was legitimately surprised at the end when it's like, well, not surprised because I know that she probably has something to do with it because she's a guest star who's not doing much else on the show at that point. But I didn't make the connection that she was the reason it was happening. I had gone through this sort of space Star Trek Rolodex of like, oh, it's an infection, or there's some sort of like radio interference, or some alien is causing this to happen. I didn't expect such a direct lift of the Sarek thing, which is fine because I think that's okay. It's just kind of like, should the reveal have happened earlier? Should we have learned that Lwaxana was suffering from this thing and maybe trying to hide it? Because it just feels inconsistent, basically, to go through that whole thing. And then once she flips and reveals what's going on, you also have the touching, tender moment with Odo at the end, which doesn't feel consistent with the rest of the episode. I feel like they didn't have I feel if you're going to go into an episode like this and do a really farcical job, you kind of have to stick to that tone the whole way through. And it doesn't work to stick in serious storylines alongside it.
No, I think it would have been better if she had some sort of reveal in the beginning. I mean, the first time that you see there's something wrong is when she's grabbing her head in the elevator. I mean, you could say maybe she needs a space Tylenol or something, but it might have made things a little bit easier to understand. But it's because I think the problem is that it's so, again, pointed as to who gets this space madness, if you will. It makes it difficult to, I don't know, relate to it, and it just seems kind of. It's not that it's random. In fact, it's the command staff and other people like Marital and Jake, but it just doesn't feel right. It's the best way I could describe it. I mean, just case in point, just to sort of jump really to the end, since you mentioned it, she has one of those attacks in the end in the party, yet Keiko and O'Brien aren't affected, and they're right there. It just doesn't make sense. It's such a pointed, again, sniper attack, not the area effect. It only hits Quark, but everyone is standing in the room. You would think that maybe there'd be a switch up of something. It just is not well carried out.
Sisko's largely immune to it as well. He doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, maybe because he was turned off by being come on to by his old man. of Dax, but at least he had the wherewithal to say, "Let's get to sick bay," as opposed to, "Oh, no big deal. She's just acting silly."
Yeah, that's kind of the like. I think that it's tough because I'm a big proponent of one of the things that Star Trek is good at is the fact that it's allowed to do sort of different episodes within its season. TNG was a good example of that. You can do like genre shows within the season. DS9 has a little bit of a harder time with that because of how the continuity of the station impacts things. So when they have episodes like this, it feels a little bit more awkward that they're having this one-off adventure. And in a weird tie to the serialized nature, they come up with this thing that like the sickness is actually releasing latent feelings that you have for people on your subconscious level. And it's not like it's a totally random thing. So they resolve that with very little explanation. Bashir is just like, well, it's deep in her subconscious. You don't want to go talking about that. It just
could
feels,
also be. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, it feels like it feels like you're hinting at something there, like it's a Naked Now or Naked Time episode where you're supposed to learn something, but you don't really learn anything about anyone because it all feels very random by the end of it.
I was just actually going to make there's no Shatner going unless I'm losing my ship on this. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Unless this was just some way to help Nana Visitor's divorce attorney gather information as to why she should no longer be married to her husband at the time. I mean, that's which is also very strange to me, that that entire little episode in the real life factor of it, so to speak. I understand that
it was Nana and but Julian Bashir Siddig had a relationship at this point, which one of the listeners has pointed that out to me, that since I didn't know that.
In fact, she had his love child. That's something. Don't tell Clay. I don't want him to get upset. So
I know, yeah, and it makes. I guess they're deep in their relationship at this point because she's going to get pregnant going forward. But it's I think the other problem with this as an episode is the fact that it the PG nature of Star Trek stops this from getting to any point where it's actually kind of interesting, and it comes across more like a high school dance that everyone is involved in. Like everyone is just kind of making out and necking or whatever the British slang term would be for it, but everyone is an adult here, yet no one seems to want to take that next step to like bring it to the sexual escalation that it seems like it should get to. And so you're left with this weird grown adults sort of like arguing like teenagers about cheating and things like that, and it comes across very goofy. And I know that the sex angle wouldn't really sell on the Star Trek level, and it doesn't sell with the goofy nature of the episode, but it feels like it's like everyone is just in this holding pattern, as you said, because they can't take it to the next level.
But I've read that it was like trying to be an homage. I hate that everything's an homage. It's an homage to the Midsummer's Night Dream, but only so lightly. In fact, I use X-Ray like you do on Amazon. The thing they were saying, like, oh yeah, it was light and fun, and some good parts were good, some bad parts, well, In fact, I think that's the exact quote of the director of this episode. It also reminded me of another teen farcical thing, like not an 80s John Hughes type of film, but there's a more recent thing in the 90s called Get Over It, which is also a Midsummer's Night Dream. It's almost the same thing, except I would argue that musical comedy did it better, or not musical, but movie Get Over It did it better than this episode.
So what's your main, if you had to like really hone in on a problem that you don't like about this one? Because I think that my major problem with it is just how inconsequential it all feels at the end. And I actually think it's kind of a funny episode. Like I laughed towards the end out loud. The Sisko getting punched by Marital and Dax knocking Marital out is kind of it's a pretty funny shoot that they did there. What did you? So my problem with it is largely.
You mean besides Jake Sisko's shirt?
Yeah. Well, besides all the clothing of the future, which is terrible. But I think my problem is just that it is I alternated watching the episode between thinking this is pretty enjoyable and this is pretty cringy. And it hit the cringy factor a little bit too much for me. But what do you think is your like specific issue with it?
It was, well, I mean, I would actually like to just take out the Lwaxana subplot out of it entirely and just have the bickering O'Briens for some reason. The there was a lot of light, fun things. I will agree with you. But it is the matter of it being inconsequential to the story, and it just, to me, it didn't add anything to the lore of the story or anything else. I mean, the fact that we're seeing this gratitude festival, they say it's the third one, yet we had no hint of it for the last 2 seasons. Although you could argue that was for building purposes. It means nothing to me at the end of the day. I don't know how else to express it except that it was a kind of a waste of time. I mean, I'm almost can remember, and I'm sure you could YouTube it, the original the trailer promotion, which has that voice like this, and it on the next DS9, chaos on the promenade as people fall in love with each other, and the O'Briens fight. Next time it's like, and we're out of toilet paper on deck 3. I mean, who cares? It's just, it doesn't add anything. It's not really interesting to me. And when you take a look at it in comparison to Defiant, which I believe is on before this, Defiant has a weight and seriousness to it, and although it does have a couple of light moments, sort of, and I don't mean where the nacelles go, but the one before this, Meridian, it just seems like that's part and parcel of the same thing, and they bookending a good episode with, well, what is like nonsense of the 2 episodes, and I think they were just too close to each other. When I had saw it originally, I remember I saw them weekly. It's like, that Dax episode. Oh, this is interesting, Defiant, and then we got, here we are again. It was just not well liked by my friends and myself at the time when we were watching it, and it just had no weight. That's as you.
I think one of the problems with it is that the relationships that they switch around, like when TNG and TOS did this, it was always given a little bit of slack because, well, not slack, it was always given a little bit of criticism because when they revealed the character switches, you weren't familiar enough with the cast for it to mean anything. Like when the crew acts crazy, it usually needs to sort of show or flip a relationship or flip a characterization or something. It didn't do that in the TNG Naked Time or Naked Now because you didn't really know the crew at that point. I feel like the 3rd season is an appropriate place to do that switch. The problem is that all of the relationships that they could flip, and I'm gonna exclude the Keiko, the O'Brien issues from each other because the O'Briens I think are like a different story altogether in the context here. But the Odo and Kira thing is the only relationship that they can really build off of or that they can show something, and they don't do it here really. Like Odo is constantly attached to Mrs. Troi, and you get a little bit of the sense, I think this is the first episode where it's explicitly stated that Odo has a thing for Kira.
But it's not really even stated. They have like maybe, 2 lines together? And
well, Lwaxana mentions that she senses it from Odo, so that's like a confirmation that a telepath has sensed something from him. But wouldn't they, if you wanted the plot to feel like it was a part of the universe, I feel like you should have stuck to that storyline a little bit more, like Odo's jealousy or something should have been spurred by that. And instead, it's very tertiary to the entire plot. And I know that they don't want to go whole hog into that, but you have to kind of tie one of the storylines into this and make me care about it, because otherwise it's just sort of random goofiness on the level of Dax being attracted to Sisko. The O'Briens are a little bit different than that, but we can talk about the O'Briens after that. But what did you think about did you think there's a lack of the Odo storyline, or what did you think?
there is a lack. I think Odo is actually treated extremely weird. In fact, he's already starting, like, if I'm going to be hanging out with you humans, and in fact, he even says something along those lines. The line, like, if I'm going to hang out with you bipeds or whatever. Like, you've been living with us for how many years, and now you're talking about this? Odo is kind of like an afterthought in this episode, and I think that that they needed something more, like you were saying, to show that he liked or likes Kira. In fact, every opportunity that you see Kira, she's either chasing Marital or running from Jake, and Odo is just standing around swaying to music in a very creepy-looking way. There's nothing there. I think that makes it a lack in the episode, and I don't think they thought it through on how he was going to act or behave towards anybody. And it's almost like they realized towards the end, like, oh yeah, we should mention that he likes Kira. There's nothing there, except for one awkward sentence where she says, Peldor Joy. I can't stand that phrase, but they, now seeing it 5 times in a row, there's nothing. In one sentence saying like, "Oh, Marital's Bishop Creepy is coming aboard." Great, but there's nothing. For me, there was nothing that led on to the fact other than Troi's one sentence that you like her better, that would lead you to believe that Odo liked Kira in this one episode. If you were seeing this in a vacuum, you'd have no idea. They were just talking awkwardly. That is a weak point. And I just wanted to harp again, is like, because since having seen this entire series through from not only when it first aired, but again on random occasions, that issue where he suddenly sees himself even more apart than he did before, I thought was handled awkwardly. When he was saying, "I figured I would," it's almost like saying, "I joined you people for your festival," even though he's known it's been there. It's like whoever was writing this did not remember that Odo had been with the Bajorans for a long time and should know all their nuances and ceremonies at least by now. That's what I feel from this.
He's growing as an individual, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I can't really disagree with that. It's the thing about the randomness is that it kind of pairs with the O'Briens on some level, except that I find the O'Brien plotline here to maybe be the most interesting aspect of the entire thing. However, the argument and the fight between them feels more realistic than it does narratively interesting on some level, which is funny. It's like what they're fighting about feels like a very very true to spirit relationship argument that people would have, where it's just kind of like dancing around the issue and not really getting to the heart, and each person has their own perspective on what they want to get done, and people just sort of fight until it hashes itself out. However, yeah, it doesn't really, there is no narrative to their fight, because Keiko is going to leave again, and I don't know. It's not like they're going to break up. It doesn't really expose anything about their relationship. I'll applaud the show for writing them more realistically, but it doesn't feel really like it amounts to anything, except for the scene at Quark's where O'Brien is sort of awkwardly a dick to her about nothing, like saying like, you can't go back to the thing or you should stay here. That feels out of character for O'Brien, but I really like their first conversation in their quarters. I thought was a very well written scene.
Well, just because I'm married, you are as well. I can sort of attest to that early, that when he came on in, although I did find it a little bit weird. Hey, Molly's asleep because she's drugged out. You want to do it? Is pretty much what he was saying. I don't know. You've been on this long flight with the most annoying character in all of Star Trek at this point, for some of us. Sorry, Bodhi. And it just didn't seem like that O'Brien was being nice to his wife after not seeing her for almost 2 months.
No, but I feel that's a very realistic problem. You could, like, this guy has not gotten laid in a couple months, and he's trying to be sort of nice and romantic to her, and it's just not the right time. So she gets upset that he's pushing that, and he gets upset because he's like, hey, we haven't seen each other in a couple months. I relate to that. What I thought was the problem became the fact that they don't explicitly just talk about it as sex. So it comes across as this weird teenaged interaction where it's like, why aren't you spending time with me?
Because I had to go to math class. That's why.
Right. The conflict is deeper than that. It's just more mature, quote unquote mature, than what the Star Trek is willing to go with.
I agree with you on that. I mean, my the argument that I think was best was in Quark's bar between them, and it was like, oh, this guy is telling you all about that. Not that I've had that issue ever before in my relationship with my wife or anything like that, but that was just a joke. That did feel like a relationship issue that was there, but they did it so lightly, and maybe it's because it's the course of 45 minutes, and they're paying Majel Barrett by the minute or something like that, and they had to get back to her, but it was very light, and it fits the high school play nature of the entire episode, although it does show that they have the most mature relationship, I would say, on the entire series, even later towards what Sisko goes through, in my opinion.
Yeah, across all of the across all the franchises, probably. Like they're the most realistic representation. It's just I feel like they're still not written properly as a married couple.
No.
They don't seem like they're really married. Even O'Brien's interactions with her, it's too sing-songy.
Yeah.
Like there's this sort of sing-songy, like weird false nature to how they talk to each other, which I feel that I wish that they just acted more like they were real people. O'Brien always gives me the impression, and I don't get this from Keiko, so it's a weird performance. He gives me the impression that Keiko is a hair trigger temper who will like flip out at the slightest thing, and she doesn't really come across that way. She comes across as a fairly grounded person. So I don't know why he's always so deferential to her and sort of like trying to like, prepare the ground before she walks. And I don't know why he does that.
Maybe during the commercials she beats him. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's just what do you think is the flaw in their relationship? Or if you had to like rewrite it, what would you do for those two?
I tell him to relax. He seems like he's always on and he's trying. They just, maybe it's their chemistry. It doesn't seem right. It's like, okay, now we're married. Okay, great. We've been married since the USS Enterprise. Let's act that through. There's something the way they communicate with each other. If I had to rewrite it, I would maybe tell him to dial it back and not be always so angry and or maybe that's they're trying to have him as like his PTSD from fighting the Cardassians, but it's difficult to put a finger on how I would rewrite O'Brien and Keiko to make it better, because they're just something where although they have the bickering down, they don't have this sort of physical chemistry that I'd like to see, I guess, between two people, and I think that's part of the problem. I mean, it's not that they're bad-looking people. It's just there's something where they just don't feel like they would be a couple, as opposed to, let's say, in the Joy Luck Club, where she was actually, there was more of a connection between her and I'm trying to remember the actor's name. I just can't place it right now. But here, there's not there. But I would like to add that scene in the very beginning I felt was the most correct coupley thing, where they got off the shuttle and Molly throws up on O'Brien, mainly because we had that at home where my son actually threw up on my wife and I actually laughed, but that's something else.
Yeah, I thought that was very good. I mean, I like the fact that in that scene, O'Brien isn't really paying attention. He's kind of distracted by Marital and Kira making out with each other, and so he's not paying attention to when Keiko comes back. That felt very good to me. It's just I would rewrite them to show them have scenes where they are not bickering with each other.
Like a regular date out or something, where they go, hey, let's go out and bed up the laundry or something. Right.
Yeah, or just to have them like have a cold open with them walking through the promenade and not arguing about something. Like just show us a scene where those two actually interact with each other and aren't fighting with each other or having some kind of conflict that they're trying to work through. Like show us that they actually exist in a real state outside of that. That's what I would do.
Now that you mention it, I think that since they've been in Next Gen, I think that's all they ever do is argue. Yeah. I can't even think of one time where they're just walking around like, hey, look at that. You want to go check out Geordi's visor? Or anything. They're always arguing.
Yeah, I mean, the one scene they had, I just remember the DS9 where they're walking through the promenade, and it ended with O'Brien getting upset about that Jumja stick or something like that. There's no scene where they are just not fighting with each other or someone else, and it just comes across as a little bit tiresome at the end of it.
And I hate those Jumja sticks. I mean, what the heck are those things? They're really disturbing.
They don't look very appetizing. It looks it's just a big stick of candy, I assume, but it does not look like something that you want to eat.
It's a weapon.
So, did you have anything? We talked for about a half an hour. Did you have anything else you want to say about this one? I don't know. I had a hard time with this one. It is the most. It is, and the feedback I've seen is that people consider this to be a love it or hate it episode. I don't know if I would go so far in either direction, but I think that it was really weird to me in that it's not an episode where I'm like, this is completely awful. On some level, I was like, you know what? Some of this is actually enjoyable. It's just got some really bad moments in it that are kind of dumb and I just don't like. So it's a weird episode for me on that take. Like I watched this one and I thought it was a singular experience for a DS9 episode. I'd never seen a DS9 episode that was like this, and I think that that's better than Meridian, which is just so bland that it's forgettable. This is different than that.
All right, well, there's no one saying I've never climbed a tree before. Yes, this is just very, very bland. It has, well, not bland, Meridian bland. It was just, again, a holding place. It's, as I said at the start, it's just meh. There's nothing, it's not good, not bad. It's just like, well, we need to fill something in this weak slot. I got an extra story idea. Let's just have someone with that weird disease come on for 2 seconds. It'll be funny. It'll end, and we'll never mention this ever again. Like every good Star Trek plot.
Yeah.
There was nothing there.
Yeah. Like
they're all that way.
That's a.
I have a question for you. Do you think that now looking back on it, do you think Jake Sisko looking at that earring was the basis for Inception? Because if you look at that earring, it looks like the top that they're playing with in that movie.
Hopefully, it should be. I mean, that storyline is interesting. I'm upset that their relationship is over. That's very upsetting. That's very upsetting to me because it's just apparently that didn't work out for him. She went to school and they're going to break up over this. That felt like kind of a weird little storyline that got stuck in out of nowhere. And the Jake and Kira thing.
Ew.
It's just very odd. Like that, I will say that the episode that actually could have been much worse on the screen than it was, because I was expecting when that started that it was going to be terrible, and it turned out to be okay. I think.
But it did seem like a crush. Like his dad says it's just a crush. Although right before the commercial break, that kind of weird staring into the camera with a creepy smile look makes you wonder.
Yeah.
It's just. Yeah. It was nothing. Again, that's probably because the entire episode, everything is nothing. It's but it was. We haven't seen an indication of Jake liking Kira to that point, right? I don't think that's my problem with it. It's just it feels like it's made up for the episode, and I feel like a lot of the plot lines here, like the Dax thing, it just feels made up. Like none of this stuff actually happens, and they almost could have fixed it by having it just say it's not a latent attraction in people. Like it's just a completely arbitrary, whoever you see, you sort of fall in love with them at first glance or something, because that fits that's how Lwaxana. You mean, so Lwaxana, she's Puck from Midsummer's Night Dream, in other words.
Right, yeah. She and her as a character is always typically just attracted to the first guy that she comes across. Like she's very easygoing in that sense, that she gets very quickly attracted to people that she just kind of bumps into and has to deal with over the story. And that would make more sense if her psychic powers were triggering that in other people, and they were becoming more attracted to just people who were around them. That would have improved the episode. It wouldn't have saved it.
Yeah, I mean, because then you would probably have that bacchanal on the promenade, and it would fit the bizarreness. Actually, what I was thinking right before we recorded, I actually heard your Plato's stepchildren saying it should have been darker. That could have been this episode if, like, she right. Suddenly everyone's like taking out whips and chains, or I don't know, Event Horizon craziness on the bridge, but not as bloody.
Or dealing with the breakup nature, like the cure of this causes legitimate loss of like sort of breakup feelings in them when they go through it,
or they walk around like they're sad. But they're walking around in a funk. Yeah, I would see that more of a more legitimate way of telling the story. But then you're falling into the Sarek routine where everyone's kind of just pure emotion over here, and Troi is nothing more than lust. And
right.
I don't know how you would. It's kind of hard to portray that being put on other people with characters who don't actually have a relationship like that to begin with, and I think that's part of the problem with the episode. Like Jake doesn't really lust after, at least we believe, doesn't lust after Kira, and Marital lusting after Dax. It just doesn't really make sense. Although, again, because we all snicker at the Doctor and Kira, that also, I believe at that time it wasn't generally known to the public that they had an affair. It was when seeing it that time, you were like, ew, it just kind of didn't fit. So that's the general weakness of this space whatever. I still think it should be called space menopause. I think that just fits better.
DS9 continued, their scene with each other just highlighted how awful kissing is on this series. It's like it's two people basically like mouthing each other's faces. It's very
and they're talking.
Awkward. Yeah,
and they're talking to each other. Oh, we got to get to the party. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Hey, wait. Let me go pick this up and talk about politics on Bajor, which was before. It's weird. It's not convincing or well done. It kind of makes you think, like, did they have to have one foot on like a chair or something for some sort of decency code or something? I don't know.
Well, they clearly can't use any kind of tongue.
Yeah.
So it's just people like open mouth kissing and just like sort of sucking each other's faces. It's very odd. But anyway, we'll take a break. We're going to play an audio clip. Me and Matt will come back and we're going to break down our own ratings and the patron thoughts for Fascination.
This is one gratitude festival they'll be talking about for a long time.
I know I'll never forget it.
I hope everything works out for you, Odo. With Major Kira.
I don't know what you mean.
Oh, don't worry, your secret's safe with me. After all, I know what it's like to be attracted to someone who doesn't necessarily feel the same way. If you get tired of waiting for her, you know where to find me.
I'll keep that in mind.
All right, guys. So if you support the show on patreon.com/thepensky file, you get to leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes. You also get to guest host podcasts, as Matt did today. But anyway, we only have a couple Fascination comments. People seem to have listed out everything but Fascination. Zam Nuclear Wessel writes, Fascination. On some objective level, I should probably hate this episode, but I enjoy it. The plot is kind of terrible, but there are great elements. Bashir once again being blind to the fact that he's suffering from the condition he's trying to cure. Dax hiding behind Sisko. Baral trying to pick a fight. And the unusually mobile camera following the condition as it spreads from person to person. Director Avery Brooks' idea? ? Dumb fun.
Yeah.
I pretty much agree with that.
It's neither good nor bad. Is what I get Zam is saying right here. It is dumb fun in a way. I guess I'm just looking at it more harshly because the way I think what I had done was I saw Meridian, then I saw Fascination. That was my fault, and then I went back to Defiant, and I was like, 2 in a row. That's terrible. But it is meaningless. I don't actually fault Brooks' direction. I was reading that he was opening up, I guess, breaking the Roddenberry strict control on stuff. That's why there's more purple. And I'm not talking about Sisko's shirt. I'm talking about, there's more purple here and there, and they had different angles. I was reading about that. So I thought that was pretty well done, and it gives it that area size of the station. But, it's, again, meaningless in story-wise.
Holly McLaughlin says, Fascination. I love Lwaxana. Her being so fully herself and so emotionally vulnerable at the same time is really beautiful. Odo is wonderful as a socially awkward guy who doesn't quite know how to handle this. I do like their scenes together. I think that Auberjonois plays off of her particularly well in a way that is more interesting than Patrick Stewart used to play off of her as Picard. Their emotional arc at the end feels too sincere for the episode, is my problem. Like the way that they bond at the end, I think would have been good if the episode had been anything more than a lighthearted farce. But because it isn't, it felt very awkward to me. I accept it as real, and I accept that that's how their relationship actually is. But it's tonally inconsistent, and I count it as a weak part against the writing.
I'll agree with you. I defer to you on that one, Wes. It's their relationship is not fleshed out. Maybe if there was a reveal like in the beginning, not with her with her condition, but saying something like, "I know that you secretly like Kira because I sense it," and maybe at the beginning, but you should spend time with me. Maybe there would be more of a sincerity towards it to the end, where they say, "Well, we'll just part as friends, but I know your secret." But that's not kind of done here. But
yeah. Kyle Barrett writes, Fascination. My God, the casual clothes of the future look terrible. I think Sisko is in serious need to be featured on a Star Trek edition of Queer Eye. It's often described as a love it or hate it episode, and while I won't fully commit to a superlative, I really enjoy the episode. It's silly but very entertaining, and Brooks does a good job directing. It's just a sexy version of the TNG episode Sarek, however, with an aging telepath accidentally pushing their emotions onto the people around them. Am I crazy, or would a relationship between Sisko and Dax actually be kind of interesting given their history? Pelder Joy. Pelder Joy to you,
You're crazy.
Well, I think that that relationship, if Sisko and Dax had a relationship, it is a more interesting version than the TNG host episode tried to push.
Well, that's a weakness in the Dax character, which you've discussed and we've all mentioned in podcasts and on Discord, is that who's driving that? Is Dax Jadzia who has attracted to Sisko, or is this Dax symbiote somehow attracted to Sisko? It's not really clear. And then you run into the problem: is the symbiote a zip drive or USB key rather? That's what makes that characterization weak, in my opinion. But
well, if they had a relationship, what I like about that story is the awkwardness of being Sisko in that position. Like I honestly didn't even really think about whether or not it was a symbiote or Jadzia issue. I really watched those scenes thinking how awkward it was because Sisko calls her old man while she's like kissing him, and it like he is intimately knows her as her previous version, and that to me adds a little bit more than the TNG host episode where the slug just goes into Riker as opposed to this new guy, and it's like, oh, are you really the same thing? This is more ambiguous and more weird for Sisko's point of view, I think, than it was for Crusher.
I agree with you
host.
on that. It's just it's interesting as without giving too many spoilers, in later episodes and later seasons, it kind of rears its head towards the end of the season. Talking about Ezri, but that's something else. But yeah, I could see it as that'd be interesting, but I think the problem would be is that you have the commander and his subordinate issue, and this still sort of is a paramilitary group. I could see that as a problem in this, as all later we even have it with Jadzia and the new added on special guest to come on forever. But yeah, I see what Kyle's saying where it would be interesting. I just don't think that would fit the dynamic of the show with the boss and his like science officer having a relationship. Yeah,
Lessons has taught us why that would be a bad idea, the TNG episode. That's about it. There's only 3 comments for Fascination. People don't really give a fuck about that episode, I guess, which is too bad. I think it's interesting. So let's get to our ratings here. I know we have a 1 to 5 scale. So Matt, what are you going to give this one on our 1 to 5?
Well, it's definitely not a 5. I'm going to give it a 2.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe like a 2.5, but I'm going to go with 2. It's not great. It has some problems. I can't give it the midpoint. It's just not something that I would say, you know what, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to watch it again, or just want to move on. That's kind of where I am.
Yeah, I think that it had such potential is the only reason I'd be tempted to give it a 3. I'm going to give it a 2 because I think it has like substantial problems within itself. But I have no problem with the concept or the direction or the idea. I think that they just really should have done something that grounded it more within DS9 than they actually do, and to give the relationships that they're playing off of mean something. If you're just, I don't like the sort of random wackiness, and the random wackiness is paired with the explanation that this actually means something because these people have these deep feelings for each other, which is ridiculous. That shouldn't have been the resolution. Just stick to the idea of a wacky, lighthearted adventure where this is interfering with people's interactions, and take the farce angle a little bit farther. Like have the interactions play off against each of the other groups as opposed to sticking with them in their groups, and maybe you would have had something. I'm going to give it a 2 as well. I don't think it's particularly strong, but I think that it's an interesting episode. It's a good bad episode, if that makes sense.
I'll go with that. It's so in the middle. It's not so good it's bad, or so bad it's good. It's just there to hold the spot till the next episode.
Guys, thank you very much for listening. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/the Pensky File is the place to go. A couple $1 a month, you get extra podcasts. You can do the Captain tier, which gives you a guest podcast appearance, like Matt has done today. Matt, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Wes.
Sure, and we will be back with, what is the episode? Oh, Past Tense is after this. We talked about it. So Past Tense, the 2-parter will be after this. Otherwise, all the social media links are in the video description and the podcast blurb. You can go to Facebook, Twitter, Discord, where all the chatter happens, and that's about it. So, I think we're done.
Yes.
Matt, I hope you had a good time.
I did, and again, Peldor Joy, everybody.
Yes, that's right. Hello, Joy. Welcome to the Gratitude Festival. I am filled with gratitude for all of your support and all your listeners. So I'm having my own Bajoran Gratitude Festival right here in this office. Guys, we will see you next time.